It's Tuesday, August 8th, 2023, and this is the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment. David, would you please proceed with the roll call?
Ayers.
Here.
Brisbane.
Here.
Tice.
Here.
Zierden.
Here.
And Weaver.
Here. And all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval or the amendments of the agenda. Do we have any changes or is there a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. We'll move on to the first open forum. If you're in the audience and would like to approach and your topic is not currently on the agenda, please approach the podium, state your name and address, and feel free to share your input. All right, we are closing the open forum and moving on to approval of the July 12th, 2003 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or is there a motion to approve?
I will move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. And moving on to the City Council Liaison Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll give that on the fact that Councilmember Jensen is not able to attend tonight, so let's go very quickly through these. The council's met twice since your last meeting. On August 1st, they held a workshop. We consider that our budget kickoff for 2024. The purpose of that workshop is they work through some of the bigger, high-level, bigger items that we'd be looking at on part of the 2024 budget. Some of them more informational, such as Bushman Road, just giving them that heads up of that's a capital fund project, but if they choose to go ahead with phase one or move forward with phase two, we'll be doing that in 2024, as well as talking about some next steps for the sewer expansion. We talked about looking at doing a streets plan, which would be considered doing a streets CIP in 2024, updating the city code, which is something that they've been talking about a lot, and they did agree that they would like to proceed with doing that as part of the budget. We talked about some organizational changes, software, the 2024 staff COLA, and then the really big item on the agenda was City Hall. So because this was a big item for this one, as well as the next agenda, let's go a little bit more into depth as where the council's going with that. Going back to May, the City Council in May received the facility assessment report on City Hall that was commissioned at the beginning of the year. And Widseth was doing that. That report showed that this facility in its current state has roughly $750,000 in deficiencies and code issues. And part of that, when the council issued that assessment, they also asked Widseth to not just look at deficiencies, because they anticipated it would be many, but also to look at, we have a lot of spatial issues, not a lot of space, not a lot of the growth space in this building. Looking at options for remodeling and expanding this building, or what could a new build look like, especially with the discussion the last few years around a community center. So those kind of preliminary options were presented to the council on May 16th when the facility assessment was presented. The council at that point decided that they wanted to investigate further the options of a remodel as well as a new build. So from May 16th through the month of July, we have had that display up in the front of the City Hall, looking at the different options to gather public input, so people coming in could provide input. We conducted an open house in June for people to come in, talk with staff, talk with the folks with Widseth, get a walk through the entire building to get an idea of kind of the situation with the building. And then we've had the ability for people to comment on our website as well. And then on August 1st, the other thing that they wanted is they commissioned a firm by the name of Baker Tilly to do a financial analysis to look at the city's finances and what would be the ability to do both the City Hall, and then also as part of that agreement as well as also to look at Bushman Road. So that financial analysis was presented to the council on August 1st. And then based off of that analysis, essentially what that came out of, and all of this was available in the last council packet, and a few documents, we still got to get those updated and put those on the website as well. But those are all public. Really what that came out is to show is the city has the ability today, based off of two essentially bond type payments we have in the levy that we've been putting in the levy the last few years, to levy about $5.8 million without increasing the levy, or bond $5.8 million without increasing the levy. And there's also about $3 million in cash that I told the council they could also potentially use towards any kind of project without hurting our reserves. So with that, the council then had a lot of discussion on if they wanted to continue down pursuing one route or another, and they ultimately decided that they wanted to look at, again, a new build. So then on August 7th, so last night, they approved a proposal from Woodseth to go into schematic design. So that's kind of the next step. You take the preliminary designs we have and they kind of take it, one depth, preliminary designs at 10,000 feet. Now schematic, we're going to come down to 5,000 feet. We're really going to get what would dimensions of the building look like, where would things go within the building, the real layout of the building. One of the things the council wanted with this schematic design is moving forward with new city offices and the new council chambers, with then drawing in, we called add alternates for library, community room, fitness center, gym, and pool. The council's been pretty open that they're not saying that they're going to build all of those things, but especially with all the work that was done on the community center study a couple years ago and the continued desire for members of the community to have those kind of elements, the council felt that this was an opportunity they didn't want to pass up to look at if we're going to build a new facility and in the future some of these elements might want to be built, what could they look like and where would they go, so that if we do build a new building and down the road the council wants to add those amenities, we kind of already have it planned and the building is designed in a way to easily add those elements to it. So those elements were also included in part of that schematic design. So Woodseth diving right into that, the goal there is to have that schematic design done by the beginning of October. That will also include a more accurate, again, cost estimate. So as we're getting closer and closer, we get continued more updated cost estimates. And then once that schematic design is done, obviously the council will then take a pause and decide, do they want to continue into full design and then actually bidding of a project. So that was one of the big items, obviously, from last night. The other big item kind of at the end of the agenda of last night was an update on Bushman Road. We did have an open house on Bushman Road on July 26th that was attended by some 50 people. And really was where we're at with Bushman is WSB, who are the engineers working on Bushman, identified that one of the biggest questions coming out of that project was what do we have to do with Bushman Road and the Ranchette intersection. And it comes out that based off of their analysis and engineering schematics that we actually will not have to move the Bushman Road intersection, which is a big plus. That was going to be one of the more costly elements. When we did the cooperative study 2 years ago and Bolton and Mink did that, they kind of had this idea that we might have to go through that wetland. And when Bolton and Mink, or when WSB really got down to the nitty gritty, they realized that they can put enough fill, they'll have to raise up the intersection, do a lot of grading on the hill to the west, but they'll be able to get the sight lines and everything in a way that that intersection will not have to be moved. And then the council was unanimous in moving forward into preliminary design with a typical section of two 12-foot drive lanes with two 4-foot, with a 4-foot shoulder on either side. So WSB is now into preliminary design on that. They anticipate they'll also have that done in October. That'll end phase 1. At that point, they'll have a preliminary design. They'll know where it would go, impacts, general impacts to neighboring properties and right-of-way, if you have to acquire anything, and then a 30%, that's a 30% design, and then a more accurate cost estimate. The council obviously then will take a break before and get more public input before they decide whether or not they actually want to move into full engineering and design in 2024, with then the intention, if they do that, of constructing in 2025. City Council began its first discussion on cannabis regulations. They'll actually have 3 proposed ordinances going before the council on September 5th regarding cannabis. One of those ordinances, what it does, the first ordinance, or at least one of them, puts a moratorium on the retail of cannabis through December 31, 2024. That just gives the city more time to discuss how they want to do the retail. The new law regarding cannabis does require the city of the size of Breezy Point to issue at least 1 retail license at a minimum. However, the Office of Cannabis Management doesn't anticipate to be up and running until 2024. Then they have a bunch of rulemaking they have to do. So they don't anticipate starting issuing retail licenses until 2025. But it's one of those things where they have authority. As soon as they feel ready, they can start issuing licenses. So by putting the moratorium in place, it gives the city more time to discuss, how many licenses do we want to have? What's the criteria for we're giving them out? Is there any zoning? I see this coming back to the Planning Commission to discuss where in the city would we want such a business to be located. So more to come on that. There's also the other 2 code amendments or zone. One is regarding where cannabis can be used, limiting it, saying that you can't use it in on public property, roads, and right-of-ways. One of the other things that they're going to be getting input in is, should it also be public spaces generally available to the public? So that could include like a private business, whether or not to include that or not. The county board considered an ordinance this morning that did also have that language, but the city could have its own ordinance that would supersede the county if they adopted their own ordinance. The last thing would be an ordinance that makes the possession of cannabis by persons under 21 a violation of the city code and a petty misdemeanor. The new law on cannabis actually doesn't, while it prohibits people under 21 from having cannabis, it actually has, there's no penalty. So they're also considers that as well. They looked at, adopted a communications policy, adopted rules of conduct and procedure, which we'll discuss at a future meeting. And then the last thing, I'll just speak of really quickly, the rezoning of lots 1 through 3, 3, 4, 5, I can't remember the lots. The disc golf course parking lots that you recommended rezone at your last meeting. They did accept your recommendation to rezone those. They put a maximum size of a new parking lot at 0.5 acres, and then also that it would be it shall be screened with natural screening elements. So that's kind of essentially a summary of both the August 1 workshop and the August 7 City Council meeting.
Does anyone have questions? Thank you. All right, then moving on to new business. And we're going to have a rezoning application R23002 for lots 1 through 3 in Outlot A, Block 1 of White Birch Vista from R1 to rezone from a low-density residential and RC resort commercial to an R4 multifamily residential. So we will begin by inviting the applicant to approach the podium. Please state your name and address and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Landecker, representing White Birch, the applicant. I live at 8581 Wren Drive, Breezy Point, Minnesota. And before you is a rezoning request to, as was read into the record, to rezone from R1 to R4 and resort commercial to R4, kind of those areas that are highlighted there, to be an extension of what is the darker brown below it, which is the R4 color, to allow for development of that into a planning and development and extend the city municipal sewer to that particular piece of property. Really don't have a lot to add to it. I know that we've submitted some suggested plans that may fit that once the zoning is in place, and although, I mean, that's just an idea of what it could look like. That hasn't been like run through the, you know, the system, so to speak, to see whether the density and the impervious coverage and everything, density, et cetera, would be allowed to fit that. But that's just sort of an idea of suggestion as to why we would proceed with requesting the zoning change to take place. The access would be off of County Road 11 through Uruguay Drive and then down to Chickasaw Circle. So the public street that exists is how the properties would gain access. The kind of the advent of why would we be here asking for this sort of request, it really goes back quite a few years when the public sewer was put in for the school. So the White Birch 7 was developed back in 79 and 80. The golf course was built in the early 80s. So it's been, you know, nearly 40 years since this development, since the project here was developed. And at that time, there was no rationale to have any kind of R4 high-density residential in this neighborhood, just simply because there was no sewer, there wasn't really any kind of improvements out there. The roads were gravel, et cetera. So, but in 2004, when Eagleview was built, public sewer was extended through the city along County Road 11 that allowed for that sewer to be extended to multiple properties along the way, of which this is one of them. And, you know, there's many, I could point to many scenarios where that public sewer for the Eagleview School has adapted or changed zoning and use. CRMC would be one where the clinic is. Things have just developed in conjunction with that availability of public sewer. So this is an area that it's along the golf course. It fits kind of the characteristics of how the golf course is being used. It does fit the neighborhood. It's residential. These would not be rental type units. These would be a residential unit. In fact, if the design is this or something similar to this, it would be townhouses that are similarly built in the White Birch Estates or White Birch Village project across the street, across the golf course that consists of about 52 units or of residential units. This development would be actually part of that. It would be a CIC continuation. They would be subject to the same declarations and covenants, which do not allow for rental. It's just simply residential. As you know, that development is geared towards senior. Most of the folks there are retired. Most of them, over 50% of them, leave for the winter. So it really is lower use, less traffic kind of a situation in a residential district. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're here to discuss the request for the rezoning. We'll have plenty of time to discuss the development of this land after that when we have to submit plans, et cetera. So it's here to discuss that rezoning request. Okay?
Thank you.
Any questions of me? Or
I just have one. You're projecting to have 4 2-unit buildings, but in what you were saying, David, was it could be 5 2-unit buildings, or if it?
No, likely not. I mean, it's all conducive to view and, you know, sort of aesthetics. While it looks like there might be room to put another one towards County Road 11, there's really no advantage for us to be considering that, just because it starts gearing towards 11 and the view is smaller. And the reason the separation is between the 2 units is the public sewer that would be extended here would ultimately be located. We would continue it up onto Chickasaw Circle to the cul-de-sac. So we would be bringing up sewer from the existing lift station, which is to the south along County Road 11, and we would extend it through our development and then through, in between those two units into Chickasaw Circle to provide for future expansion of those properties if it's ever needed. And it may never be needed, but, you know, I can't predict what's going to be, you know, what may happen to failing septic systems down the line 20 years from now. As you see on that particular picture, that is sort of the sewer, indicates the properties that are available for city sewer right now. So the brown, the dark brown is those properties which is adjacent to the city sewer, which provides that opportunity. And although the property we're talking about is sort of highlighted in purple or dark blue there, underneath it, the lot that's against the road is also brown, which you know, provides or allows for that to be publicly sewered. So we have talked to the city engineer, your city engineer, Widseth, and they've actually given us a little summary of 3 options to get sewer there and what the cost would be. I know that when I was here last month that it was important for me to come back and say sewer would be available for this, and the answer to the question is yes, it would be available. And it's a matter of choosing the right option and then laying out a plan that would fit and match that sort of scenario.
Any other questions? We may have more for you if you
Okay,
mind.
yeah, no, I'll
Okay.
be right here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and moving on to Jerry's staff review. Would you please lead us through that?
Again, this is a petition to rezone, and the applicant is White Birch, and the property that is petitioned to be rezoned is part of Outlot A, and lots 1, 2, and 3 of White Birch Vista. The current zoning of those properties is R1 for White Birch Vista, and the portion of Outlot A, which is actually part of White Birch Golf Course, is resort commercial. The applicable codes is 153.031, .034, .44, and .045. Again, the request of White Birch, owners of White Birch Vista and Outlot A, White Birch 7th, has submitted a petition to rezone property currently zoned R1 and RC to R4. If the petition is approved, the owners intend to pursue a planned unit development to construct 4 duplex twin home similar to the White Birch Village townhome project, which is be across the 18th fairway and adjacent to the 9th fairway, I think, of White Birch. 10 and 11. The property is currently accessed from White Birch Vista. Is from Chickasaw Circle. The property adjacent to County Road 11 on the north, White Birch Golf Course on the east and south, and single-family dwelling lots to the west. The proposed rezoning incorporates a portion of White Birch Golf Course and White Birch Vista and connects to White Birch Estates, CIC, along County Road 11. R1 zoning allows for single-family dwellings. R4 would allow with the CUP residential duplex, residential PUD, single and 2 family. The owner is currently exploring the extension of municipal sewer to Chickasaw Circle cul-de-sac. Sewer extension would be a necessary part of any development of a PUD. Prior to acting on the rezoning recommendation, the commission will need to find that the proposed development is consistent with residential uses in the area. Options: deny rezoning request because the proposal use is not consistent with the residential use in the area. recommend approval of the request because it is an extension of the R4 zone to the east and is consistent with the area residential uses. Short and sweet. I understand that part of the whole concept is to look at the proposed PUD, what the process that the rezoning would need to happen before you could even think about the PUD. Most of that is background conceptual at this point. The crux is to make a recommendation either to rezone or not rezone. That recommendation would go to the council. The planning commission's action is only a recommendation. Final action is by the council.
Any questions for Jerry?
So it's just a recommendation on our part, so we can't state it has to have city sewer, which you state in there, but,
Well, R4 zoning requires city sewer.
right,
In order to get more density, the sewer is necessary. That is an option that, even if you rezoned it today, nothing could happen without the sewer. On-site septics are not an option for an R4 zone.
okay.
Does anyone have other questions?
No question.
All right, so we're going to move to open this up for public discussion. If anyone would like to approach the podium, please state your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Roger Jensen. I live at 7841 Chickasaw Circle. My property is directly adjacent to the Breezy Point Resort property. I'm just to the west of the proposed site. And I have a couple questions about, I understand now that the sewer is fairly close already. My question is, as we have our own systems, are we going to be required to hook up to that system? And or are we going to be assessed?
Jerry, if you would, please.
Okay. One of the things that we have talked to the developer about is that we want to see the sewer extended at least to the cul-de-sac. There was no intention to go any further than the cul-de-sac. The intention was that if in fact there were failed systems down the line, that there would be an opportunity to extend that line and solve the failed systems problem. There's no intention to assess anybody at this time.
Okay.
The intention is to have the availability of that sewer line on that side of the County Road 11. Right now, the sewer line that runs is on the opposite side of County Road 11.
Okay.
So the option would be available at such time as is necessary. It's not something we're proposing to do at this point.
Okay. And I think one of the other questions I had has already been answered, that this would not be a rental situation, or our VRBO or anything like that, or timeshare. It would be.
I believe that we've had some of those discussions with the developer also. I believe that the covenants that go along with White Birch Village today do not allow the owners of the units to rent.
Okay.
And I think the intention is that they would have similar covenants for the ownership or for the homeowners association.
Okay, thank you. And the only other concern that I have is the entrance onto Ouray Drive. That intersection of County Road 11 and Ouray, especially coming from the city of Breezy Point up the hill, it's kind of a dangerous corner because there's a curve coming around and there's no bypass lane. And with the increase in traffic, just concerned about the potential for accidents, but, you know, I don't know if there's ever any possibility of building a bypass lane there or not, but turning left there and waiting for someone coming around that curve and someone coming from behind, a number of times cars have had to swerve around and pass on the right, which is a dangerous situation. But that would be another concern of mine, but that may be something that can or cannot be done, because it sounds like it's a county situation because it's a county road. So.
This actually, oh, go ahead.
Typically, when the county does do a reconstruct, they look at existing intersections and they do include those turn lanes and those type of things, those type of operations. I don't see it happening until the road is redone.
Right.
But I think it happens automatically once the road is redone.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Good evening. I'm Jamie Hookreid, 7778 Chickasaw Circle residence, just off the corner of Ouray and Chickasaw. So I might not understand the full process, but there's 3 lots shown there now, and the development is showing 4, and it seems like there's concern from a council member that there's, you know, it could be 5. So I don't know how, you know, being a residential neighborhood, my concern is that it grows into something, you know, different than what the intent is, being a residential neighborhood. So I would like to express that concern.
In order for the next, let's assume, and I hate making assumptions, but assume that the council said the rezoning was okay.
Okay.
The next step is to formulate a planned unit development. And that planned unit development would specify the number of units and how they'd be placed on the lot, and the whole development would be approved or disapproved at the same time. That process is very similar to this process, where there's a public hearing that is required for that planned unit development conditional use permit.
Okay.
That's where it becomes either bigger or smaller or stays what's being proposed, but you would have another chance at that time to state your objection and or state the fact that you were told it was going to be 4 and now it's 18 or something like that. And I'm exaggerating when I say that, but that process will allow you to have that review and comment at the same time.
Okay, thank you. So there was no talk about water. So water's not available or not part of any?
We do not have water in any place in Breezy Point. The only system that's there is the resort's own system.
Okay.
So that's not something that we're looking at this time.
Okay. I had the same concern about rentals, so it sounds like 100% ownership is the intent, and I guess again, I'm a little uneasy with the intent, and I think I understand the process now. As the more details lay out, would be further comment period in consideration. Okay. So how does an extension work if there's sewer stub there, and let's say there's a failing system up the road? How does that extension request and cost work? I'm sorry if I'm getting outside of, we can have this conversation outside of this meeting too, if that doesn't fit the context of the meeting, but.
Typically, it's if the sewer would be extended, there would be a feasibility report done by the city engineer. looking at potential costs of the extension. Typically, when the extensions are done in existing neighborhoods, it probably goes along with the reconstruction of the street at that same time.
Yep.
There also is, there probably would be assessments at that time. What those numbers are would be available potentially, or estimated costs would be available at the time of the feasibility report in the public hearing. The council then has an option to order the improvement and order the assessments, and there's also appeal process for that assessment. Typically, when extensions have been done in the existing neighborhoods, they have given the folks the option of hooking up right away, or at such time as the system fails. But at the time that the improvement is made, they would put a service line from the main line to each individual properties, so that they do have the option available at a later date.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all the questions I got for now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the open forum at this point and then move on to the commission discussion. I just wanted to start saying we did have, I hope everybody's had a chance to review last meeting's notes as well, because we did talk about a lot of this at that point. And I just want to bring up some of the topics that we discussed that might help us aid in how we recommend moving forward. So there was extensive discussion about the sewer, which we've discussed again. It sounds like that has been a situation that has been continued to be researched, and that it is an option to be able to provide the sewer and the diagram where it would show. So that question mark has been answered. We've discussed traffic based on the coming off of 11 and going pretty much immediately to this development. There are a couple homes in there, but there is not an extensive residential area for traffic use, so it doesn't seem like there would be a high impact, was what we discussed last time. And that this is a residential area. These homes would not be short-term rentals. They would be for residents, typically probably seasonal people, and also likely seniors or couples versus families. So the impact to the area seems to be fairly consistent with what is already in that area. So that gave us some confidence there. That the landscaping and the look and the feel would be consistent with the look that is in that area. It wouldn't be something different or outside of the norm. And that, I think that was an access, just basically that access to the lots based on where you'd seen the driveways and such was clearly defined. That was some questions that we had. Are there other discussion points that anyone can recall or that you'd want to bring up for us to consider?
You covered it pretty good.
Question?
All right. Is anyone comfortable at this point making a recommendation or a motion, or do we want to have more discussion?
I would make that motion to approve the application for rezoning.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion has passed.
So it's just basically a recommendation, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that recommendation will go to the city council on September 5th.
Perfect, thank you. All right, then moving on to old business. Is there any old business that anyone would like to bring up for discussion? All right, and moving on to staff reports. Anything new to consider?
None.
All right. And anything new for a mayor or city council report? All right, and then seeing no other discussion points, we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you.